So today I'm going to be talking about the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo film made in 2009, directed by the Denmark director Niels Arden Oplev. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo was originally one of 3 books called the Millennium series, which was written by Stieg Larsson. I'm unsure of when it was written, and to be honest I've researched and I don't think anyone's quite sure when he wrote the book because it was in secret. He wrote the books at night, the novels at night, and it was actually his only, not the only novels that he actually wrote. And strangely enough, you know, which has been unheard of, he wrote all 3 books before he actually went to go to a publisher to get the first one published. So he stacked out all 3, and actually apparently there's rumoured that he's got a 4th sort of manuscript, and then he's got other little bits and pieces in his work that his wife found, but they have not been adapted as of yet. And experts actually say that the Millennium series was actually going to go on for 10 books or so. I don't know if that's, you know, 100% true, but that's what they say. Now unfortunately Larsson never actually got to see the success of his trilogy series of Millennium because he died in 2004, November of, and his books were later published forthcoming years after that, which was really sad indeed. I mean, he was only 50 years old, so that's not really a great age, and so therefore, you know, he didn't see the success of in the cinema world actually as well. I mean, there's been 2 adaptations of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, the Swedish one, which was the first one, the original film, and then there was the British Hollywood adaptation, which was released 3 years after, made 3 years after the original Swede film. So first of all, when I bought the film, I thought it was the Daniel Craig one, I must admit. I didn't know there was actually an original Swedish film where the language was spoken was Swedish. There was no English spoken, like the actors spoke all Swedish, and obviously I wouldn't understand that. So there was an option for me at the beginning of the film to either watch with English subtitles or with English audio. I opted for the English audio because I thought that, you know, it would, even though it would be a little bit annoying and frustrating to sort of watch their mouths not talk the same as what I'm going to be hearing, but I also thought I should opt for that option because if there's going to be like writing at the bottom of the screen, I'm going to literally not pay as much attention as I would like and need, perhaps, especially for a complicated narrative that it actually turned out to be. Although I would point out that it was, because I've never experienced that before, it did take time to get used to, and therefore, you know, I'd say the beginning 5 minutes I was like, what's going on? I had no idea really what's going on, but although it was repeated throughout, you know, the narrative and touched on, I sort of sussed it out. Now what something else was which was quite confusing at the start, which you know, this beginning of a film is, I'd say, probably the time where you need to pay the most attention to, although usually you can afford to not pay as much attention to as you would throughout, you know, the most suspense intense areas in the film. I was a bit confused at the beginning, but I understand why they did it, by the complete contrast of the 2 main characters. I was trying to figure out what they had in common. Mikael, he got into trouble for writing this report about billionaire Hans, who was a billionaire known in the public figure, and so he got into trouble with that at the beginning. And then at the same time, you know, there was this story of Lisbeth, who was a young female in her 20s, and Mikael's probably like double her age, but Lisbeth is like quite gothic, you know, and is a bit more masculine than one would first think. She's had a background, a history of quite a bad history, to be honest, and she's not afraid to get violent at all, you know, for herself, to protect herself. So that was that, and then I was like, Okay, so there's kind of like two people in this same-ish sort of world, a legal detective in a way. So I was a bit like, okay. So anyway, they came together. I think she wanted to retain, even though she has, but I think she wanted to retain dominance again. The really violent scenes, like really violent scenes, the disturbing images of people being who were deceased, had been murdered in absolutely horrendous ways. Yes, and then of course the really graphic sexual scenes. So definitely an adult film. I really enjoyed this film on the levels of visually and the emotions that it actually dragged up. So let's talk about the visual aspects of it firstly. Now, I really liked how it was shot. How they shot it was extremely insightful. It was, although the camera was the third or second, person in the room. That's how I felt. I mean, the camera was usually never alone in a circumstance, so it was almost as though it just basically followed these main cast around, and therefore it felt like it's like a third or the elephant in the room almost, and you really had a scope on what these characters were thinking, and we found out things as soon as either Mikael or Lisbeth were finding out things. So in a way that worked as though we were, the audience, were like the detective as well as them. There's a scene where Mikael was saved by Harriet's brother, the girl who went missing, and he saved him basically from getting shot from another family member. Yeah, he came to the rescue and took him back to his house, and actually he's gonna go for him now. So Harriet's brother went for Mikael and tried to kill him, and it literally almost did. He was adamant on killing him. The moment in which Mikael realises he's in danger, and there's a moment he's just left there alone and the camera stays on him for quite a long shot, and is us realising first he's not going to go and kill, he's gonna hurt him. But he does realise, and it's something like that, which is a prime example, which did occur several times in the film, that we kind of had the authority in knowing things. And I think that is because we're viewing it from afar. If, say, you were in that situation, you'd probably not even think about it, and after all, these characters, Mikael and Lisbeth, are sort of professional. Now, the characters and stereotypes I love, really, in this film. Now, it's all hinged on the back of stereotypes, so for an example, most obvious thing, the two main characters, Mikael and Lisbeth, two most unlikely of couples, actually end up being a sort of couple, okay? Now Lisbeth is, as I say, quite masculine. She's all gothic-y, she's in her 20s, she's extremely socially awkward and deeply angered, and then there's Mikael, who is a middle-aged man, okay, he's just wears the most ordinary of clothing. They both took pride in their appearance to some extent, and his was more for the professional, he's sort of like a routinely thing, so it's not so slick, it's because he's done it for years and years and years, so it's not so slick. Now Lisbeth, her appearance really is, I feel, for personal establishment, or you could say it's a reflection of what she feels inside. She literally just wears black, with excessive black eye makeup, black lipstick sometimes, you know, multiple amount of piercings, completely polar opposites, let alone their ages. And they come together, which is breaking boundaries, of course, you know, which personally is what I love about film mostly. You don't, you know, that's what I think is what's new cinema and what makes a film so successful, is that they break boundaries. The location, the amount of locations, I mean, wasn't really a great amount. I think there was probably around 10 to 15 different locations, which for over a 2-hour film, you know, you could say is quite minimal. But with the nature of crime, mystery dramas, there's always going to be a few locations which are going to be constantly going back and forth from, a bit like the base really. And I think that also you didn't need that many locations. Again, you know, the narrative, the cases, the characters, they were chaotic enough. If you're going to put locations and bits, you know, different locations that are just unnecessary, it just confuses it up even more. And also I think the film celebrates contrast. So you've got lots of characters to be trying to figure out, and then there's a contrast with the minimal amount of locations. The locations also, it was all filmed in Sweden. They've made the cold look more enticing. And the cold as well was something that sort of just got in the way sometimes of scenes. So it's got in the way of, but you know, pun intended, it was like breaking the ice in some scenes. And I think they used, the makers and director, you know, used the stereotypes of Sweden being cold to their advantage. And I feel, I don't know, some of the big, you know, extreme long shots of the landscape, they were peaceful. It's either summarised a scene, that's just, you know, the mood of the scene. It either summarises our thoughts. So yeah, you know, using the locations and the camera work, definitely, you know, mixing those two ingredients together gave me the recipe of colloquial knowledge about what was going on, which you do need in such an intense case storyline. You know, it's kind of like when you're revising for a test, you know, you spend hours revising, and sometimes you just need a breather from that to then, in a way, let it go in. So, as a conclusion, I still feel that this film literally breaks a lot of boundaries in terms of violence. You know, there's this sexual assaults and the cases, you know, seeing the murders that had happened, you know, the photographs of post-mortems and things like that at the crime scene. It's like an open file, because we are the detectives, so we have to sort of see everything in detail. I'm really intrigued to watch the English version with Daniel Craig in, but I also really want to watch the next two films, which are made what strangely enough were actually made in the same year, 2009. I hope they are of the same quality and not just rushed. It has that serenity, the grit, and not so many sometimes dashing lights. It's just purity. Thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed watching, and sorry if it's been a really long video. I will try and edit it down as much as I can. Thank you very much.